Hello. Okay, so we are going to go through immersion and we're going to look at the instruction that was ineffective and how we can make it effective at the school. So the first thing that I noticed is that there was a lack of scaffolding for multilanguage learners. As we saw that the ELLs were all just kind of mainstreamed in this one class, and our main character, he just needed more assistance, and he wasn't at the level he was to be integrated fully. Also, the lesson wasn't really tailored towards him. So we talked about this in Gibbons. Temporary and future-oriented targeted help supports learners in developing new knowledge. So he needed learning that wasn't over his ability, that were still in his zone of proximal development. And then mainstream classrooms can be highly ineffective for learning context for ELLs. So they're from the same page, they're from the same chapter. It talks about how ELLs, they're not going to learn if they're in an environment that is not scaffolded with them in mind. Another ineffective teaching moment was the positioning of the ELLs. So the Yoon reading hits this right on the head where individuals are positioned as incompetent in a certain field of endeavor, they will not be accorded to the right to contribute to discussions in that field. Basically, students were not, when they did contribute, they were made fun of. Because they were, he had the right answer, he just didn't have the words to describe it. And it's the idea that, he got the right answer, but content knowledge was placed over his actual ability. So while he could find the right answer, he could not verbalize and share the right answer and how he got it. The next idea is that they were in a high anxiety environment. So if we look at the Krashen theories, the last one is the effective filter hypothesis, which shares that the most effective variables favoring second language acquisition are low anxiety environments. People acquire second languages when they obtain comprehensive input, when their effective filters are low enough to allow the input. When the main character was going to raise his hand, he was really scared, nervous. So it shows that, and kids are making fun of him at the end. So it shows that it's a high stress environment. And that environment, well, the teacher might not cultivate it, the teacher isn't doing enough to stop it from happening. Another thing that was happening is that they were erasing their students' first language. They were like, no, Spanish or, Spanglish could be used. The issue with this is that is something the student knows. So you want to create a curriculum that bridges what they know to what they're going to learn, which is the Yanis curriculum. It's also translanguaging and it's content amplification, message abundance. It's all that, communicating to the student any way possible they need it, and maybe they need to be pulled out, but he knows the language, he knows Spanish, so use that as an end to help him learn. The other thing with erasing his first language is that it's not culture relevant pedagogy. It erases the culture that he comes from, and it's Americano culturalism, so it's pushing our culture onto the student. Okay, so some effective teaching ideas to fix what's happening in the school. The first thing we need is to scaffold lessons for ELLs. So whether that could be providing them more visual aids, because in the video he was using visual aids, but it was confusing him. He was looking and he saw these blocks, but they weren't straight blocks. So he needed visual aids. He tried using it; they weren't helpful in that particular sense. I think if they were scaffolded to him, they could be helpful. Student needs to be more positioned, so he's not looked down upon by his peers. That's an easy, we saw that in the unit reading where the teacher opened herself up, explained, her connections to culture, and opened the ELL up to be a valuable member of the class. Create a relaxed, interesting environment so that all students can learn. You know, start ending that behavior of like the ooh or calling them stupid when he just can't communicate his thoughts, but he had the right answer. Use asset-based thinking to not place the ELLs as deficit. This goes with the idea at the end, they were like, look at, they were looking at them in the deficit. They're like, they have the lowest level of, proficiency. Yes, but, that's deficit thinking. Think about what they have and where they and where they are going to go. The other idea is that you want to use the content knowledge they already have. So know Spanish, use Spanish as a beginning to get them to help them learn English. You have to start from somewhere, and they already have a starting point of their home language. And then differentiated instruction would help. You can use visual aids in that, but making sure that the content isn't going directly over them, and make sure you're teaching towards all students, not just the general population.